Now, from AgriX perspective, we are basically, that's our mission, is to expand value by enabling the X factor for our clients via our networks and solutions. Now, our network is ever expanding of partners and affiliates, and some of them are online with us now. But it's a continuous, that's a growth process, and the network of our partners affiliates enable us basically to tackle any solution or opportunity that's there. Then from a solution perspective, we have a whole range of products that we can deploy and that we can help clients to address certain challenges or opportunities, whether it's in the HR space, talent space, human capital, the green economy, very interesting solutions that we're currently sitting with. And then we're working on projects, also very exciting projects that we're busy with, that, maybe in the future we can share more on that. But what we also believe in is in terms of the value of sharing, the sharing of insights. And that is where the whole series of Agri2B webinars that we said we're going to host one every month. It is to say, what are the challenges for the agribusiness of tomorrow? And what are the insights that we can share to help and enable businesses to survive? Now we talk agri, we talk about farmers. Farmers are the blood of the agri sector. I asked Dr. Roelof Botha a few years back to do some research in terms of R1 produced at a farm gate. If you transpire that into a value in the value chain, what is that relationship? And he came back and said, and prove it basically. R1 at a farm gate add another 19 rand into the value chain. So without that R1 at a farm gate, that 19 rand won't be in the economy. And it's probably more than that because it's expanding. Now, we also know that 96% of farming businesses are actually family businesses. And the future for family business is important. And any business, you need to be competitive, you need to be sustainable and profitable. But if you're a family business, you have a few other challenges as well. And that's why we know that statistics, and that Andre has also shared, 13% of family businesses seeing the third generation. And that's where today is coming in. And so if you start to look in terms of the family business of tomorrow, the agribusiness of tomorrow, what are those challenges? What must you do today to ensure that you are there for the next generation? And there's nobody better than Andre to talk to us around that. And I think it is actually great that we are a small group because it can be more interactive. But he has the experience. He has consulted more than 600 businesses on family businesses. He's an author. He's written 11 books. He's on media, radio, every week. But a deep understanding of the challenges, the issues of family business on the ground. And I said to Andre, come and share with us your insights in terms of what are those key requirements that you need to take into consideration for a family business. And if we are not in a family business, we know people and our clients are in a family business. And I think that's important that we take that message out and say that these are the things you need to look at. And we have someone like Andre in our ecosystem, also on our panel of advisors, to help and assist customers. So I'm not going to say any more about Andre, also the founding member of FABASA, the Family Business Association of South Africa. I was privileged to be part of that process many moons ago, and Andre is still driving that and adding a lot of value. Andre, I'm going to hand over to you. Just
Thank you.
quickly, so Andre's presentation will probably not be longer than say 40 minutes, maybe
Yeah,
shorter.
but the shorter,
But then
smaller
we
group.
have ample time also for questions. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, Chris, thank you very much. You've done such a great, let me just open this introduction of me that I don't have to do it again. There you go. Can you guys see the presentation?
Yep.
Yes, make it. Yeah, I'll say. Yeah.
Okay. All right, Chris, you've already discussed all my books and stuff. Ek gaan nou nie weer daar weer stil staan nie. We've done that, and just to make sure everybody understands what we mean with a family business, it's just simply they must have the majority of the shareholder and be active in the business, and very important is to safeguard it for future generations. They say, Professor Gideon Maas always said, if a husband and wife work together and there's no intention to take it to the next generation, they are actually called co-preneurs. It's not a family business. So this is a vital part of family business. Of course, you already mentioned the statistics. I'm not going to do it, but 80% of registered businesses in South Africa are family owned. So it's the backbone of all economies in the world. There's no exception. Gordon mentioned the farmers, 96% of commercial farmers are family farmers. And you can see the same picture in the world. 570 million commercial farmers, 500 million are family farmers. It's no wonder that the United Nations has declared the next 10 years as the time for family businesses, because they feed the world. We are here today to talk about the major challenges to family businesses, which they need to address. There are 3 clear challenges in family businesses that you will find all over the world. There's no exception. The first one is entrepreneurship. If you don't instill entrepreneurship in your children, you will pick up problems later on. The second one is constitution. That's actually linked to governance. Governance is very specific to a family business, and I will elaborate on that a bit later. The constitution is just a tool that we use. And then succession planning. Chris has mentioned figures. Fact of the matter is less than 4% reach the 4th generation. And most family businesses flunk in the 3rd generation. There's a 3rd generation problem. Right. In terms of entrepreneurship, very quickly, I don't want to waste your time with these things, but entrepreneurship is quite important because globalization has created what economists refer to as a surplus economy, because trade barriers disappear and there's more and more people selling their products and services into the South African market. And that leads to what is called the surplus economy. There's too much of the same. Now, what I'm going to look at and find very interesting is what Donald Trump is doing in America now, because he's actually anti-globalization. It's about America first again. He's back to that sentiment, and we will see how that pan out. I'm still trying to figure out how his tariffs are going to help him, but we can discuss that later on. But I teach people lessons from nature. So all I'm teaching you here is showing you the leopard. Let me just get back to the leopard here. All I'm showing you here with the leopard is quite clever. He does not operate in a surplus economy. He catches his prey and he climbs up into the tree where there's no animal rivalry. He removes himself from a surplus economy. And sometimes in your business, when things go slow, that's the way to do it. I always love to tell this story of entrepreneurship because in an era of plenty, where there's too much of the same, you have to create scarcity. And this is something that I walked into in Hong Kong, well, more than 20 years ago, 25 years probably ago. When I was walking in Hong Kong and I was looking for a camera, and the next moment I saw the shop, Van der Merwe shop, Cape Town. But beste prijs in Afrikaans. I trust you can read that. It's actually beste prijs in Afrikaans. Now, I don't know if some of you have been at the shop before, but it made me quite curious. And I went into the shop and I was looking for Mr. Van der Merwe, but because there's no Mr. Van der Merwe there, and the Chinaman started telling me the story. He saw a lot of South Africans coming into Hong Kong, and he decided he wanted to do something to get him inside his shop, and he asked him what is the most beautiful place in South Africa, and they said Cape Town. And what is best price in your language? And they said best price, and that has become the name of his shop. And he was laughing when they told me how many South Africans are walking into his shop. Other extremely important thing for family businesses is they need to protect their territory. The whole idea of a family business is to survive throughout the generations. So you need to protect what you have because people want what you have. The analogy for that, nobody looks after territory better than the rhino.
2 tons of muscle that can reach speeds per hour. Short-tempered and armed with horns that grow up to 1.5 meters long. Rhinos have the power to enforce what is theirs. Territorial bull rhinos will spend their days patrolling the boundaries of their stake, spreading their dung by ritualized kicking and urine marking up to 10 times in a single hour sends a clear message that trespassers will be charged.
Now, I always have to remind family businesses that they need to beware of comfort zones. You know, even the rhino that's so strong with territory has got a natural enemy, which of course is the humans, who's after its horn. Now, every business and every family business has got a natural enemy or spots in the business that you need to watch. So make sure you do that. And one of the biggest problems I find sometimes in family businesses is like they've been around for generations and they don't always want to change the way they do things. Sometimes the market demands that you change the way you do things, but they kind of develop comfort zones over time. The danger of a comfort zone is that it doesn't hurt. Now, that same leopard that you saw taking that animal into the tree, look what happens to him. And there you go. He developed comfort zones and implies that he didn't climb up high enough in the tree. I'm done with entrepreneurship now. I want to focus on governance, the constitution. I've compiled more than 600 of this in the country. This is vital. Fabasa is linked to FFI and FPN, the 2 international institutions, and we focus on best practice. And one of the most important things for family businesses to get in place is a family business constitution. Now, to explain this, that weighing scale you see with the 2 baskets, that's the essence of what a family business is all about. If those baskets hang uneven, there's problems on the horizon. Sometimes they focus so strongly on the success of the business that they don't care about the relationship, then the children walk away anyway. On the other hand, you'll get families that they just try to please the children all the time and the business pays the price. So what a constitution actually does is to create a sound balance between the interests of the family and the interests of the business. So that is what we do when we create a family business constitution. Quite important. My focus has never been on inheritance. It is on legacy. Legacy is a lot more than leaving money behind for your children. So just listen to these words quickly.
Legacy is not only about what we leave for our children. It's about the values that we instill in our children. It's to teach them sound values and to teach them good work ethics and to create a winning culture that will endure the business.
And that is quite important to understand. So that's what I do with family businesses. Now, this book, Leierskapswaardes, Wysheid uit die Plantryk, Leadership Values. The point of the parts here was simply that the average lifespan of businesses is 25 years. So I wanted to know, why didn't you have family business that's been around for centuries and even more than 1,000 years? I went out and I asked that question all over the world. And the answer that I got back was quite simple. It's all about their value system. Values that are instilled in their children and the employees from generation to generation. And everything is tested against those values. So I also take them through this value exercise. But I then ask them, what are these values you're referring to? And here are the 10 that most of the oldest family businesses in the world believe in. There's nothing difficult about it. It's stuff that you know: consistency, fairness, knowledge, integrity. Servant leadership is a value that's growing in the world. It's the whole idea that the leaders are there to serve and not to be served. What was interesting for me is vision. I never thought of vision as a value. Values to me is like consistency and accountability and things like that. But that is the core value of the oldest business in the world, Kongo Gumi, in Japan. Now, hold your chairs. They were founded in 578. They are on their 51st generation, the same family. I asked him, why is vision your core value? And they taught me the Japanese principle, which they refer to as the Kaizen principle, which simply means continual renewal. Now you understand why they've been around for 1,500 years plus, because continual renewal is what I believe in. There are two values I want to highlight because I walk into this in family businesses more than anything else. The first one is fairness. Fairness is extremely, there's a lot of conflict I deal with in family businesses, a lot of mediation I have to do. And every time when somebody thinks something is unfair, then we deal with conflict. I mean, the very first family business in the world was a family farmer, and already Cain killed his brother Abel because God did not accept his offer, and he thought that was not fair. Now, I want to give you some examples today. If you want to think about family harmony, there's something you need to remember. One of the biggest problems, challenges I face is coming from the parents themselves, because a lot of them believe equality is equal payment, equal remuneration is fair. That creates a huge problem in family businesses because it is not always fair. Now, I want to give you here. You have what we refer to, and you'll see it here, sweat equity. I'll get back to this now. We talk about sweat equity. You have children that are involved in the business and children that are not involved. And those involved in the business, how do you remunerate it? And they have this tendency to want to pay equal remuneration to all the children, and it creates a lot of chaos. I want to give you examples of why what is not fair, the typical things. I've dealt with these two in this year. First one is a farmer, young farmer from Mpumalanga, who contacted me. His dad died 10 years ago, and he remained on the farm where he farms with his mother, and he takes care of her. His father created a trust, and all three of the children are beneficiaries in the trust. Now, 10 years later, these other two who's never been involved, the other brother and sister who's never been involved with the business, now wants them to pay out 2/3 of the value for them. For him to do that, he's going to have to, there's a lot of debt. He's going to have to sell the farm and pay the debt. And once he paid them, he will probably end up with less than they do. The question is it fair? Another example is a 62-year-old man came from the Northern Cape to see me. He's been farmed with his father for 40 years in the Northern Cape. His brother is an engineer that lives in Newton and is quite rich. But the father now believes in his world that he needs to split this farm 50-50. Now, the question there is this fair? Is equality fair? Of course, it's not fair. The father didn't listen to him, but I called the father and I convinced him that this is not fair. These are the typical things that I deal with. Another thing that I'm sitting with, there's a client in Botswana. The two brothers has been in the business for 15 years. And the sister now joined 3 years later. Now the father died, and the mother wants to bequeath his shares to the daughter so that she's got equal shares in the brothers. They are very unhappy about it because they said they have 15 years service. It should count a lot more. How can she own the same shares? And any other warning I want to give you, because I saw this happening in this business, is work performance. The fact of the matter is, in the 3 years that she came in, she doubled the business. So you have to be very careful to just look at years of service. You actually need to look at work performance as well. If you want to learn mediation lessons from me and what to avoid in the family business, is equal remuneration, irrespective of individual contributions, is not fair. The golden rule is always rewards drive behavior. Don't forget it. The way you reward a person will determine what they do. The best practice is to have assessment. I even have my family business, and some of them are fighting against it, but I've enforced it in the system, is to create performance contracts, especially for those that's in managerial positions, and there needs to be performance measurements. And they need to have key KPIs, as we used to call it in the corporate. So I'm doing that in a lot of family businesses nowadays. If you don't do this, if there's a lack of assessment and contribution, it's one of two things that's going to happen. Your children that are outperforming the rest will leave. Why should they stay if they're in the same remuneration than others who do not do what they do? We even go so far as to have profitability formulas that we actually work out the profitability of each family member in the business. If you don't do that and you focus on equality, you're kind of creating a socialism system in a private enterprise. Now, I just want you guys can still hear me because it's very quiet on that side. Koos, julle hoor my nog, né?
Yeah.
Okay. Just listen to this lady, the impact of this.
Let me tell you a scary story. An economics professor at a local college made a statement that she had never failed a single student before, but had recently failed an entire class. The class had insisted that socialism worked, that no one would be poor and no one would be rich, a great equalizer. The professor then said, okay, we will have an experiment in this class. All grades will be averaged and everyone will receive the same grade. No one will fail, but no one will receive an A either. After the first test, the grades were averaged and everyone got a B. The students who studied hard were upset, and the students who studied little were happy. As the second test rolled round, the students who studied little studied even less, and the ones who studied hard decided they wanted a free ride too, so they studied little. The second average test result was a D. No one was happy. When the third test rolled round, the average was an F. As the test proceeded, the scores never improved, as bickering, name-calling and blame all resulted in hard feelings, and no one would study for the benefit of anyone else. To their great surprise, all failed. And the professor told them that socialism would ultimately fail, because when the reward is great, the effort to succeed is great. But when the government takes away all the reward, no one will try or want to succeed. And that is socialism, my friends, a race to the bottom.
Now, exactly the same thing applies to family businesses. If children are not remunerated according to what they could contribute, then the ones that overperform will start not doing that anymore, because why should they? The other important principle in family businesses is the value of stewardship. Now, to me, that is the essence of what a family business is all about. Because you have generations that build up things, and then in your generation, you need to take over and you need to protect and grow for the people that will follow you. So it's not your things. That principle is extremely important in family businesses. Nobody said it better than Boerplaas, the oldest family business in the country. When I asked them how did they survive so long, they said we were taught from generation to generation that the farm does not belong to us. We merely borrow it from our children. Not we inherit it from our father, we borrow it from our children. And that tells the story. So the biggest enemy in a family business, and I can see them when I walk in there, and I address this, is there's no place for me, myself, and I in a family business. I wrote 2 Afrikaans books for the people that understand Afrikaans, because I use stories to relate these businesses. I'm the first person in these stories. I'm not going to go into the stories now. But I use stories of real family businesses and real things that happen, that show what happens when things go wrong, and we have to reconcile relationships, and then also best practices of family business that follow suit on best practices in the country. So these books, the one follow on the other, the same story of the families carry on, and then there's new stories as well. Now, let's now focus on the best practices. The best practice is to create a constitution. Now, I'm not going to go into detail, but all constitutions start there must be a clear vision. It's extremely important that the incoming and the outgoing generation has got the same picture in their mind, that mental picture of how they want the future to be. And I do not move on before we're on the same page and everybody agrees, because everything flows from that vision. And I teach them a lot. I use the analogy of an eagle when I teach about vision, because the eagles don't know any boundaries or limitations, and that is exactly what your vision should be. There should not be an end, and it should challenge you. That is quite important. Let me just go back there. Then I go take them through a whole value exercise. We need to determine their core values, and that becomes the yardstick for everything in the future. We go through employee policy. It's not your birthright to work in a family business. If you can't contribute, you shouldn't be there. There's a whole set of rules we create. Ownership policy, compensation policy, and I'm very strict on that compensation policy. For instance, in the farming industry, your salary and salary-related expenses may never exceed 1/3 of your total expenses of the year. So we even have formulas that we apply there. Communication policy, quite important because they don't adhere to the law. There's new regulations in the Companies Act, new regulations in the Consumer Act. They don't even know about it. They don't keep minutes, all of that stuff. I forced them through a constitution to start keeping minutes and all the stuff that, they have to adhere to the law. And then there's an advisory board. An advisory board simply means that I teach them it's important to appoint at least one person on your board of directors that is not a family member and there's no shareholding. A person with business acumen that can just make sure that you make sound business decisions and not emotional decisions, as they sometimes do. And then the family and forum, and so it carries on. Then I do the succession. Now, succession is quite important. You need to have a succession plan that's clear. Now, the succession plan don't only focus on financial matters. It focuses on identification and preparation of successors. We work out everything that needs to be done. How do you find the best successor? How do you prepare your successors? All that stuff. There must be a plan A and a plan B. I also want to know what happens if something happens to the successor. What would plan B be? And so we carry on. Then financial care. And then we look at their structures. So I work, when it comes to tax-friendly structures, I work a lot with financial advisors and accountants and attorneys to make sure that all of these stuff is in place. The analogy I, of course, use for family businesses is the wild dogs of Africa, the most successful hunters of Africa, because they understand teamwork. But what makes them very strong is the way they prepare their successors. They catch the prey live and bring this live prey to their kids to teach them to hunt. Hunting is their core business. So, yeah, and they're very caring. They will not move on if somebody's hurting that pack. They will simply carry on. Right. Koos, ek nou baie vinnig gegaan. Ek wil maar net met die laaste gedagte afsluit. I teach family business to never give up. They are going through challenging times. I mean, you all understand the political environment with the farmers and all of them. I always compare the python with the lion. And I teach them that python's Afrikaanse naam is perfect. It's a luislang. He is bloody lazy. He will never go out to find a prey. If a lion gets hungry, he will go out and find his prey. You need to control your thoughts because it becomes your words, your habits, and it will eventually become your destiny. It all starts by the way you think. Thank you very much, Koos. That's that. Ek het nou baie vinniger as jou 40 minute gemaak en vaar ek, nee.
Dankie. Ons waardeer. Dankie Andre, ek dink dit gee baie goeie perspektief vir almal in terme van dit wat jy doen en dit wat jy raak gesien het en nog steeds doen.